listeners! This is a special crossover episode with Koala Moon, made by our friends at Sleepiest. Koala Moon is the kids' bedtime stories and sleep meditation show that makes bedtime a dream, hosted by the world's biggest fan of bedtime stories, Abbe Opher. Now, let's jump in.
It was the holiday season, and Sleepy Forest Elementary had decked the halls and trimmed the trees and strung fairy lights anywhere they could possibly be strung. Festive songs filled the hallways, and any time the front door opened and another animal bundled in from the playground, frosty air chilled your cheeks, and snowflakes drifted in to melt on the carpet. Outside, it was cold and snowy, but inside, it was as toasty as can be, and there were bobble hats and woolly scarves hung on the pegs all along the corridor. Koko and his friends were sitting around a lunch table, having polished off plates of cheesy bake followed by jam roly-poly. They were now busy talking about all the things they loved about the holidays. Koko and Kira had spent 10 minutes gushing about the Christmas tree their family had put up together the night before, describing every last bauble, from the one of Santa on a skateboard to the snowman made of ping-pong balls. They even posed like the fairy they'd put at the top of the tree. Next, Camo the chameleon chatted about the sledging he would enjoy on Christmas morning, sliding down hills and starting snowball fights with his dad. Prickles giggled and wriggled his hedgehog nose. "As long as you save the snowballs for him," he said. "I don't want you throwing any at me on the walk home." Koko turned to Prickles and asked him what he and his family would be doing to celebrate Christmas. Prickles grinned. "We don't celebrate Christmas," he said. "We're Jewish. We'll be celebrating Hanukkah." Koko was taken by surprise. He never knew that. Before he could reply, there was a loud trill and the school bell sounded. Prickles, Camo and Kira hopped out of their seats and hurried to put their trays away, ready to go to class. The end of the day floated away, as those end-of-term, giggle-filled afternoons often do, and Koko soon found himself home again, unlacing his snow boots and taking off his puffy coat. "Grandpa," Koko said, throwing himself into a cosy armchair, "Prickles doesn't celebrate Christmas like Kira, Camo and me. He celebrates something called Hanukkah. The thing is, I don't know much about Hanukkah. I want to make sure Prickles feels included, but I don't know anything about it. How can I learn more?" Grandpa smiled. "Well, you could always just ask him, Koko. But since Prickles isn't here right now, I do know someone you could call. My friend Mimi and her grandson Kiddo celebrate Hanukkah. They even have a podcast where they share stories. Remember, like the one about the egg contest?" Koko nodded. He remembered that. Grandpa often played it in the car. Of course, Mimi was so wise. She and Kiddo probably knew all about Hanukkah. Grandpa dialed their number and handed the phone to Koko. Soon, happy, bubbly voices were cooing their hellos through the phone.
Hey, Koko.
"Hey, Mimi. Hey, Kiddo. Boy, do I need your guys' help. My best friend Prickles is about to celebrate Hanukkah and I want to learn all about it so we can chat about his holiday and he doesn't have to listen to us waffling on about Christmas all day. Can you help me? Please?"
Of course we can, Koko.
It would be our pleasure.
Okay, I guess My first question is, this is embarrassing, but what is Hanukkah?
What is Hanukkah? Hanukkah is so fun! We have latkes and all sorts of desserts and sing songs. Sometimes Isaac and Theo and Ari come over and we play dreidel. Oh, I have to teach you how to sing Ocho Kandalikas.
Whoa there, kiddo. I think you're getting ahead of yourself. Let's start with the basics for Koko. Hanukkah is a Jewish holiday, the 8-day festival of lights.
Okay, I see. But what exactly are people celebrating? Like Christmas, people celebrate Christmas for all kinds of reasons these days, right? But for Christians, it's the day Jesus was born. Why did Hanukkah start?
Well, Hanukkah celebrates a great miracle that happened a long time ago. Way back then, after years of oppression, a small army of Jews called the Maccabees fought back and triumphed over the far larger conquering military. When they eventually reclaimed their holy temple, there was only enough oil to keep the special lamp, or menorah, lit for one day. Miraculously, that small bit of oil burned for 8 whole days, long enough to procure more oil.
Wow, that's such a cool story. That's like a miracle, right? So, what do Jewish people like Prickles do to celebrate Hanukkah? I'd like to maybe do something with him, if I could, to celebrate. Could I?
The major tradition of Hanukkah is lighting candles on a special lamp or holder called a menorah. This is why Hanukkah is known as the Festival of Lights. The original menorah in the Hanukkah story had 7 branches, but the menorah we light on Hanukkah has 9 branches, one for each of the 8 nights of Hanukkah, and an additional one for the shamash, the helper candle used to light all of the other candles.
And also, we spin the dreidel. That's a special spinning top. And eat foods fried in oil, like latkes and jelly donuts, to remind us of, well, oil.
Oh, that makes my mouth water. Maybe I can make Prickles some jelly donuts. Yum. What other foods do you eat? What did you say? Latkes?
Jewish families all over the world traditionally eat foods fried in oil as part of their Hanukkah celebrations. Latkes, potato pancakes, and jelly donuts, or sufganiyot, are pretty well known, but tostones, fried plantains, svenj, Moroccan fritters, gulab jamun from India, and more are also eaten.
That sounds delicious. I hope Prickles' mum makes that too, and that I can go round for tea. Kiddo, what's your favourite thing to do at Hanukkah?
I love playing dreidel and also singing songs with my family.
That's really cool. Kira and I always play board games at Christmas. That's kind of similar. And when is Hanukkah exactly? Is it the same time as Christmas?
When we have time someday, Koko, we'll have a whole chat about the special calendar that Jewish people follow. This year, 2024, something very special is happening.
The first night of Hanukkah is on Christmas.
Oh, so we'll be celebrating at the same time. That's brilliant. And one last thing. Even though Prickles doesn't celebrate Christmas like me, can I still give him a present? I picked out a special scarf just for him that's fine enough to not get caught on his spikes. I was really looking forward to giving it to him.
Of course you can, Koko. Sharing customs is a good thing. Gifts aren't a traditional part of Hanukkah, but are a newer custom that some families have adopted. Some families still don't give gifts, but focus instead on tzedakah. That's kind of like charity, helping and giving to those in need. As for us, we do give gifts in our house, but we follow this rule. You get something you want, something you need, something to wear, and something to read on different nights.
Wow, it's really cool that charity is part of the holiday. It's good to think of others while celebrating. Thank you, Kiddo and Mimi, for all of this. You've taught me so much. Bye-bye for now. Oh, and Happy Hanukkah.
Hanukkah Sameach. That means Happy Hanukkah.
Oh, then Hanukkah Sameach.
Happy holidays, Koko. I can't wait to hear about how you and Prickles celebrate together.
Koko hung up the phone and gave his granddad a hug. "Thank you, Grandpa," he said. "Prickles is going to be so impressed when I show him how much I've learnt tomorrow." The next day, when the bell rang for lunch, Koko sped over to take the seat next to Prickles and asked him about his Hanukkah plans. Prickles smiled and told him he'd light the menorah and spend lots of time with his family. He'd eat delicious foods, sing songs, and spin the dreidel. Prickles was so pleased that Koko had taken an interest in his holidays. "We'll be starting at sundown in a few days," Prickles said. "Do you want to come and light the menorah with us?" Koko gave Prickles a big hug and said, "Yes, please." On sundown, on the first night of Hanukkah, Prickles threw open his front door and bundled Koko into the warmth, brushing the snow off his fluffy ears and taking his poofy coat and bobble hat. "Welcome, Koko," Prickles said. "Hanukkah Sameach." "Hanukkah Sameach," Koko replied, calling through to Prickles' parents too, who were in the living room. "Come on in, Koko," Prickles' mum called. "You're just in time. It's time to light the menorah." Koko hurriedly untied his snow boots, wiggling his toes in his woolly socks as they adjusted to the warm cottage. The little koala and the hedgehog padded through to the lounge and huddled in around the windowsill. Prickles' mum took the shamash candle and lit it. When the little flame was burning, wibbling and wobbling on the candle, Prickles' dad gave some blessings in Hebrew. Koko thought it sounded beautiful and listened carefully whilst watching the little flickering flame. With the blessings said, Prickles' mum lowered the shamash to the first candle on the menorah, and they all watched as the first candle was lit. Prickles' smile lit up his face, even brighter than the flickering candle did. Koko took his friend's paw and gave it a happy squeeze. With the candle lit, Prickles' mum and dad retrieved some small gifts they'd hidden behind the curtains. They handed Prickles and Koko a book each and a little bag of chocolate coins. Prickles' book was about trains, which he'd been intrigued by since his trip on the Hedgerow Express. Koko's was a book of fairy tales. Koko felt so happy that he'd been included and wrapped his arms around Prickles' mum as he thanked her, careful not to get spiked by her spines. Next, Koko and the hedgehogs sat down on the squishy sofas, and Prickles told Koko that they were going to teach him a Hanukkah song. Ocho Candelitas. Koko grinned, remembering that was his friend Kiddo's favourite. The song isn't in English. It's in a language called Ladino, which is kind of like a Spanish-Hebrew hybrid. Although it wasn't a language Koko knew, Prickles taught him the song sound by sound, and soon he was singing along with everyone else. It was a lively and fun song, and Prickles and Koko danced around the sitting room holding paws. Next, they sang Hanukkah or Hanukkah, which Koko had heard before. He sang along, singing about lighting the menorah, spinning dreidels, and eating crispy latkes. All that singing about latkes made his belly rumble. Prickles' dad grinned at Koko. "Sounds like someone's ready to eat," he said. Koko grinned bashfully, patting his tummy. "I've been looking forward to the food," he said. "I've never tried a latke before." Prickles put his paws on Koko's shoulders and steered him through to the dining room, where the table was piled high with all kinds of delicious foods. Koko licked his lips and tied a napkin around his neck, which he only did when he was planning on eating a lot. Prickles' dad asked Prickles to say a short blessing before dinner, which he did proudly, and then it was time to tuck in. Everything was delicious. The latkes were crispy and golden, and Koko finished his first one before he could even pause to say how tasty it was. Next, Koko spooned some tostones on his plate, and when Prickles asked if he knew what they were, he said, "Fried plantains, right?" thanking Mimi and Kiddo in his head. Plantains are like bananas, but bigger, and when fried like this, they were absolutely delicious. Kind of like potatoes in texture, but with more flavour, and a golden caramelized crust. They were one of the best things Koko had tasted. Koko asked Prickles' mum whether he could take some home for his sister Kira, and she nodded her head and promised she'd make him a doggy bag, so he'd have extra of everything. Koko's favourite was the soufganiot, the fluffy, round fried doughnuts filled with sweet jam. He ate 3 of those. After dinner, the koala and the hedgehog family sat around the table for a game, spinning the dreidel. Each player began with 10 tokens. Prickles explained that you could use anything as tokens, really, but that they used pennies, mostly because they liked how they sounded when they jingled in the pot. Each player put a token into the pot any time it was empty. Then, whoever's turn it was to spin the dreidel would try and win them all. Each person took a turn to spin the dreidel. It was a 4-sided spinner, and each side had a different Hebrew letter on it. Depending on which letter the dreidel landed on, the player would win nothing. Half of the tokens, all of the tokens. Or, if they were unlucky, they'd have to put an extra token in the pot from their collection. Any time someone ran out of tokens, they were out of the game. Koko started strong, winning a whole pot of tokens, and Prickles kept winning half. Prickles' dad, on the other hand, didn't win anything, and he went out first. Every spin had the players on the edge of their seats, and Koko couldn't help squealing excitedly when he saw the result of each turn. Koko was out second, after a couple of unlucky rolls, and then it was down to the last 2, Prickles and his mum. The game went on for a while longer, and it would look like Prickles was about to win until his mum had a winning streak, and vice versa. Koko and Prickles' dad were watching intently and cheering the players on. Eventually, Prickles' mum lost her last token to the pot, and it was official. Prickles was the winner. Prickles jumped up in joy, and Koko lifted him in the air and cheered for him. When the buzz of the game wore off, Koko began to actually feel quite sleepy. His head began to bob and drift towards Prickles' shoulder. Although, when Prickles' parents asked if he was tired, he would say in a soft, sleepy voice, "No, not one bit." Not long later, there was a knock on the door, and Koko felt himself lifted into the warm arms of his grandpa, who carried him out into the cool air whispering Hanukkah Sameach to the hedgehogs as he left. Koko whispered Hanukkah Sameach too, as loud as he could, and heard Prickles yawn, "Good night, Koko." Koko's grandpa carried Koko all the way back to their own cozy cabin, through the warm living room and to the bathroom, where he put Koko down to stand on the fluffy bath mat and passed him a toothbrush loaded with minty toothpaste. Koko took it from him and began to brush, eyes half closed with sleepiness. As he did, his grandpa sat down on the edge of the bathtub and asked him how his evening was. "It was lovely," Koko said through a mouthful of toothpaste bubbles. "I had the most magical time. How lucky I am to have such a good friend like Prickles." Grandpa grinned and ruffled Koko's ears. "Very lucky indeed," he agreed. When Koko had finished brushing his teeth and washing his face, he tiptoed into his bedroom, where Kira was already sleeping, tucked into her blankets and snoring softly. He gave her a soft kiss on the cheek and whispered, "Good night, Kira." But the little panda hardly stirred. Then he put on his fluffy star-patterned pajamas and climbed into bed. Laying there, in a nest of fluffy blankets and poofy duvets, Koko smiled to himself and let the images of the day float through his mind. He thought of softly glowing candles, dancing in the reflection of a window. The grin on Prickles' face as he danced and sang Ocho Candelicas, shaking his hips and waving his arms in the air. The warmth of the dining room and the table piled high with delicious foods. The dreidel spinning around and around and around. And the happiness he felt being carried back to his home, safe and sound, and full of new memories. Koko took one last happy sigh and closed his eyes, drifting into the sweetest of dreams.